Good afternoon and welcome to this export talk. Today the team is understanding the different payment mechanism when sending abroad. My name is Victor Dulay and I will be your moderator. Today we have the chance to have Vincent Ripet, who is International Business Advisor. We'll start to talk in a few minutes. If you have any question, don't hesitate to write your question in the small chat box on the right of your screen, and I will interrupt Vincent to ask you a question directly. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon to everybody. So Vincent speaking. So very important today for the people who already follow our previous session is really to ask the question that you can have, let's say, at the time that you have, because that's more important today, let's say, to answer to your question, because it's mandatory that you understand clearly the different method of payment and why you have to use one or the other, taking the context. So I start my presentation. So why taking care of payment matters need to be considered when dealing abroad? When you deal abroad, don't forget you are not anymore inside Belgium. So meaning that when you are inside Belgium, if somebody does not pay you, you are in your own country. You can go to a lawyer, you can go to a court, you can try to see the people. That's not far. Belgium is not big and so on. When you are at hundreds of kilometers or thousands of kilometers in country with totally different laws, totally different use and so on, everything is not anymore the same. So don't forget that no business, no company, no enterprise can be run without an appropriate treasury, depending on the needs of your company and relation with its clients for payments. So let's say if you are a company and inside your company you have a huge investment, meaning that you have lots of cash and you are able to purchase, you are able to produce and so on without any payment that will come after by the clients, that's one reality. Most of the company, mostly in south of Belgium, Wallonia, but as well as in Brussels, what is the situation? We face some SMEs, and SMEs not even at the level of European Union. When we speak SMEs at the level of European Union, that's in under 500 employees. Here we are with relatively small companies at European level. So you have company with 5-10 persons, sometimes less, sometimes a little more. But the reality faced by this company, this type of company, is the same as the big one. What is most difficult is that as they have few financial resources, they have really to take care about their cash. When I say the cash, that's the money on the account of the company. So don't forget that most of the time within Belgium, customers pay after they receive goods and or services with some time a down payment at the order. So let's say you produce chocolate, you send to your customer, and you can do even by yourself in Belgium 200 kilometers. At latest, the chocolate will be 2 days after it left your company if you give to somebody, the same day if you do by yourself, and usually inside Belgium, you give to the client 30 days to pay, something like this. Imagine that you do the same with some product, let's say that go by sea to China. It leaves your company, but the ship to arrive in China, that's 1 month. The time to custom clear the goods at the port, that's still around 1 week. And then the delivery to your client somewhere inside China, so we are around 6 weeks. And then the client will pay at a certain time after he receives the goods. This is really difficult. So we have some other way to deal internationally. So dealing with foreign markets at distance, but also uncertainty relating business and of course relating payments. So if inside Belgium you hear about a company that have problem, that will not be the same. If you deal with Romania, you are not in Romania. If you deal with Argentina, you are not in Argentina, and so on. So you are not aware about the situation of your customer necessarily. Therefore, it is mandatory to have an overview of all these aspects linked with payment to reduce the risk of non-payment. So, how to limit the risk of non-payment? As you know, if you are in business, you do contracts, what is called legally a contract, formal, but let's say also contract like purchase order and things like this. So, for a good start for your payment, you need also a good contract. So the key element of the contracts and their relation with payment are the following. So if you already follow webinar that I give before, you are aware also of this. But so let's say I have 10 things that you don't have to forget in a contract. And these 10 things are linked also with the payment. And I explain you right now why. So first, the parties to the contract, who sell, who buy. So taking care to your buyer is of importance because a supplier is facing a commercial risk on its client. So a commercial risk, that's your client who become insolvent or bankrupt. But don't forget, this is the reality that you feel in Belgium. If you have a client, of course, you look to your client. But when you go foreign, one element has to be added to this, because a client inside the country can always pay companies from its country. But when you deal foreign, in Belgium, there is no problem to transfer money across Europe, across the world, and so on. You don't have any problem. I speak about Belgium. I don't even speak about the European Union. I manage some business in Bulgaria, and in Bulgaria, if you exceed a certain amount of payment foreign, let's say something like 5,000 euro, you need a special authorization. That is not difficult to obtain, but you have one more step for your payments. So if your client does not succeed to make approve the payments, you cannot receive it. So let's say that's what is called the political risk. And I take the example of Bulgaria expressly because Bulgaria is not in the Eurozone. So meaning that the Bulgarian state can still, by its own, decide lots of things regarding transfer of money, regarding receiving money in Bulgaria, and so on. So this you have to take in consideration. If you act with business with amount not too important, you will not face regularly this kind of problems. But if you deal with big amounts, and the big amounts is variable for everybody. Of course, if you are in a small company, if you have an order of 10,000, it can seem big for you. But of course, if you start to be with 100,000 of euro, for sure, in most of the country, you will have some paper to fill and so on, not yourself, but your client in order to exit the money to pay you. So the political risk in a country, when we speak about political risk, most of the people are thinking about revolution, riot, and so on. But mostly the political risk cover the lack of foreign currency. I give you an example. If you are in Morocco, inside Morocco, everybody is dealing in dirham, But if a payment has to be done foreign, you cannot send from Morocco dirham foreign, not because the foreign country does not accept it, because the Moroccan state forbid to pay in Moroccan currency foreign. So you need to have a contract in foreign currency. And of course, the central bank of Morocco control this flow of money in and out, and client need authorization to exit with currency. If you are dealing with Algeria, for example, here it's still worse, because we will see, let's say in the second part of my presentation, the typical method of payment at international level for small and big contracts. But in Algeria, when we speak about small contracts, more than 5,000 euro, this method called letter of credit is mandatory, meaning that an Algerian company cannot pay you simply by transfer, because if the amount of the contract exceeds 5,000 euro, they have to pay you through a letter of credit, meaning through a commitment done by a bank in Algeria towards the supplier. We will see you later on. We are speaking about the client, the risk of the client, but I say that we have to take care about the parties, meaning that you do some activities foreign. If you sell only goods, normally that's not a big issue. But in previous webinar, we discussed about services. And to do some services abroad, you need to be registered. And you need also, let's say, to have some fiscal numbers foreign. For example, if you want to install a machine in a country, normally you cannot do it without being registered in the country. So, as in European Union, if you do an installation, if you do maintenance, if you do repair, you need at least like a VAT in the country of the client. You forget to do it, but you have performed your services. Everything is in order, you send your invoice. And then what appears? The client cannot pay you because by the law of his country and the fiscal rules of his country, he cannot pay for some kind of services a supplier foreign if the supplier foreign did not invoice him with, let's call it a VAT number delivered by the authority of the country of a client to the foreign supplier. Your moderator of today is responsible for the zone in Asia and in China particularly. So in China, for example, we have some very strange rules. So if you do a contract with a company in China and you are not registered in China, I don't say that you have to be present in China yourself, but you need a fiscal number. And if you don't have certain kind of authorization, for example, if you do some training to some clients to make them use with your tools and so on, if you invoice this and you don't have this registration, you will never receive your payment foreign because it's forbidden by the Chinese state. So let's say, to summarize, I take care about the commercial risk of my client, about the political risk of a country of my client, and I have to look if I have all what is needed to invoice my client in his country. Once again, if it's only goods, normally you don't have too much problem. If it's something else than goods or a combination of goods or services, then you have to take care. Object of the contract. So that means what you decide to supply, what the client decide to purchase. So the object of the contract, or the quantity and the description of goods, services, and so on, has to be crystal clear. Why? Because if you don't deliver exactly what was agreed, what will do the client? He will reject your invoice in part or in total, or he wants that you solve some problems and so on. If you don't do it, you don't receive your payment. So let's say sometimes I see some companies, they sell something, but it's not very clear what they deliver. And they say, oh, we will agree with the client after. No, it will be too late. That's at the moment that you sign the contract that you have to know exactly what you are supplying or the service that you will perform. The price in the contract has to be negotiated in transferable currency. That's the example that I give you with Morocco. But it is needed to check the political risk of the country of the client, meaning, is this country able to let money go for it? Term of delivery. If some are familiar with our webinar, we have spoken a lot about the Incoterms. So let's say most of the people does not link Incoterms and payment, but it's very important to have a clear understanding of the Incoterms if you are dealing with goods. Why? If it's an Incoterm, family E, X work, family F, FCA, FAS, FOB, port, airport of departure, or warehouse or supplier, or even an Incoterm of a C family, meaning that you transport the goods till the client country or even to the warehouse of the clients. So EFC families of Incoterm, your payment is due when the risks are transferred to the client. And the risks are transferred to the client when the goods are leaving Belgium, let's say in our case. If you deliver in the D family, the risks are transferred when the goods arrive in good condition in the country of the buyer. Meaning that if you do an invoice when goods leave Belgium in a D family, so for DAP, for things like this, DPU to an airport of arrival, for example, don't forget that normally your payment is only due when the goods arrive in good condition. So meaning that if the goods are deteriorated, missing during transportation, your invoice will never be paid. So meaning that perhaps you have to cover yourself by an insurance. 5, delivery date. Payment is linked to delivery. So we already spoke about in the previous one. And performance by the seller, meaning that if goods, services suffer delays, payment could be postponed, reduced, or not become due according to specific clauses in the contract. You are a company and you want to have some, let's say, article for St. Valentine on the 14th of February. The supplier did not deliver to you, let's say, 10 days before 14th of February, and the goods arrive at 24th of February. You are not interested anymore to receive little hurt and so on to sell to your client after St. Valentine, because that's totally useless. So for example, this kind of contract, some buyers do it in the D family, and they add something in the contract, meaning that if you arrive later than a certain day, even if you deliver, they will not pay you because the goods are not anymore of any interest. What we will discuss today is, of course, the payment method. So let's say I select for you the one that are appropriate for SMEs. So we have a transfer. We will speak later on, the draft or bill of exchange, the cash against documents, the letter of credit. So let's say this we will speak in details that are a subject of today. Linked with the payment, you have a payment time. That's a time granted to client to pay after delivery or performance. It's usually requested in Western European markets. So that was my introduction at the beginning. So in a contract, you have also some applicable laws. So it can affect the payment in case of non-compliant or delayed delivery, as well as for property matters. So you become owner of goods, for example, not at the same time for every country. I give you an example. In France, according to French law, you are owner of the good when you have fully paid the goods. So meaning that a client pay you 95% of the value of the goods, and you have performed properly your contract, you are still owner of the goods. In some other country, that's not the case. If the applicable law is foreign, of course, there will be a court or an arbitration foreign, meaning that if you have a late payment, if the litigation is, let's say, in a foreign court or arbitration, it will not be so easy for you to defend yourself. Imagine I'm now in Bulgaria. If a Bulgarian client doesn't pay you and you have to come in Bulgaria to claim your payment, it will cost money and it will not be so easy. So that's why we also select some method of payment, because some method of payment you have less risk of non-payment, or you have facility, let's say, to manage this from Belgium. That's the case of letter of credit. So we will speak after this. And at the end, enter into force of the contract. So that's purely juridical, this kind of thing. But regarding payment, let's say if you claim a down payment is the money that you need to start to produce, to start to deliver your goods or to perform your services. So if you don't link the enter to force to the down payment or the opening of a letter of credit to be sure that you will have your payment if you deliver the goods, if you don't link to this, meaning that you sign a contract and it's entering into force when it's signed, it means that if the client does not pay your down payment, you have already to go to lawyer, to go to court and so on to claim your down payment. So it's easier and it costs less to link the enter into force with the receipt of your down payment. And I will always recommend to any company, if it's possible, to always ask down payment to the client to secure a part of the payment at the start of the contract in order not to discover at the end of the contract when you deliver the goods that the client become insolvent or things like this. If you deal only with transfer, that's an important risk. Most of the company, they don't know the method of payment. They just say to anybody, pay by transfer without evaluating the risk on the client. So we have finished for this introduction. So if is there
Vincent?
Yes.
Yeah, just I have a question, because this is a list of all elements that should be integrated into the contract according to you. but of course the client has to agree on that. So
yes, of course.
what would be the most important if you had to give a priority list?
Let's say the first one with the parties at the contract is very important. So let's say you cannot deal with a client foreign without knowing anything from the solvability of the client or knowing anything from the state where it's located. So I give you an example. Some months ago, I was contacted by a company not so small, around Wavre, and they were dealing with seal, and they say to me, oh, there's no problem, we have a client in Mali. I say, yes, but your client of Mali, you don't have. Did you see the commercial risk and the political risk? Oh, yeah, but that's a big company, there's no problem. But then we discussed, yes, but it was something like 2 million. I say, yes, but you take the contract, you deliver for 2 million. And it was purely trading. If they don't pay, what you do? I say, but you have a letter of credit. Yes, we heard about this and so on. And finally, they go to the client, which was this and so on. And finally, by investigation, it was not possible to do the business because nor the client, nor the money was good to banks in Belgium. So we cannot secure the payment. So of course, if it was a company with millions of euro of cash, if they want to take a risk for 2 million, that's okay. But if you need to receive your 2 million to do running the company, this you cannot keep it. And what I would recommend, let's say the second object and price normally. That's natural to use like this. Regarding the term of delivery, this, frankly speaking, always avoid the D family, because the D family, if you are with goods, if the goods does not arrive in good condition in the country of the client, for sure you will have problem of payment, because it's at your risk that the goods are delivered. These are the main things. And of course, our subject of today, choosing the correct payment method.
Also, if another question, is there any document available where we can find a good contract template? Is there any institution that could provide that? For level somewhere?
You have the level of International Chamber of Commerce, so meaning International Chamber of Commerce from Paris, model of contracts. But I draw your attention on one thing. A good contract has always to be done according your product, the country you are dealing with, and so on. So of course you have model of contract, even let's say lawyers are there to help you. But the big problem when people go to a lawyer, they expect to have a perfect contract, but the company knows itself the product she is dealing with, the risk to the product, and so on. So I give you an example. I deal with a company supplying biotech equipment. So of course, the risk of delivery of this biotech equipment are not the same as the product I deal in Bulgaria, which are namely chocolate, and are not the same than the engineering product that I was dealing before. So of course, for example, I deal with chocolate, and now that's winter. For sure, I don't have big problem for quality to my chocolate. In 2 months' time around Bulgaria, it will be hot. So of course I will have problem with the quality of my chocolate during deliveries. So that's why I tell you that the perfect contract, let's say, to be taken like this from a source, you always need to see each clause what is applicable to your product, meaning that if it's not applicable, you no need to put in the contract. And of course, you have to know the specific risk to your goods. So, for example, if you deal with fresh food or things like chocolate or cheese or things like this, you will better send it by a direct flight to a destination, because, for example, if there is a transit in Dubai and the product become not good, of course the client, even if he cannot, he will try not to pay you because the product that he received was not good anymore to be resale. And of course you can go to the court and so on, but if you didn't tell to a client that your product has some specific risk that he has to take care during transportation, or that you have to take care for you and you have to book the transportation accordingly, that's really a big problem. And that affects payment, be sure. Nobody pay a product that he received damage. Even
Okay, thank
if
you.
he has to do it.
Okay, thank you. We have another question. If I sell
Yeah.
FUB, so free on board, how can I prove that the goods were delivered in good condition on the ship?
That's very easy, because let's say a FOB delivery, the goods are, if there are some damage to the goods, it has to be noticed on the bill of lading, the transport documents. So meaning that we will talk later on about letter of credit. So the bank accepts a transport document with no, let's say, notice from the carrier that he received the goods damage. That's what we call in French réserve au transporteur, reserved to the carrier. So if you do a FOB and you receive a clean transport document with no specific notice from the carrier, normally client have to pay.
Okay, and we have also a question. In case of a B2C e-commerce payments,
Yeah.
so there is a 100% payment before the delivery of the goods. What about the retractation law? If the good is made to order, but I believe there are some exceptions to this regulation. If the product is made to order, I believe there is no retractation law. Can you confirm this?
I'm not specialized in e-commerce, but let's say when you say for account, meaning that somebody order to you and the goods are leaving, let's say, a manufacturer directly to the client. That's the understanding?
Yes, that's
anyway,
what I understand as well.
Anyway,
I believe there's
you
not
are the seller. Yes, but retraction, let's say you cancel your order, or when you receive the goods, you send it back. This is not anything to do with what we do in B2B. That's a special rules that are defined for e-commerce, and take care, these rules are at the level of the European Union. So in European Union, we have a clear frame, and I'm not specialist for this, we have a clear frame of e-commerce to private consumer. But take care, if you contract with somebody outside European Union, then that's not the same thing. I give you an example because I had this in the past to a friend in Belgium. She has ordered goods from Switzerland, so outside European Union. She received the goods, she was not happy, and she sent it back. But of course, as it is a Swiss company, to deliver the goods in Belgium, they had to pay the custom duties and the VAT. And of course, they are okay with the VAT, but the custom duties, anyway, they are not refundable. So meaning that once you have paid, the custom will not reimburse to you if there is a problem. So when she sent back in Switzerland, she received back the money, less the fee, less the custom duties. So on international matters, we have to take care about this. And what I have frankly to recommend is always to be linked with some lawyer or some advisor that are specialists for e-commerce, because that's really a specific matter. I deal in B2B between companies, but let's say in B2C, that's really specific. I can explain, let's say, regarding the fiscality and so on without too much problem. But regarding all the rules applicable, that's really not what I'm dealing with usually. Something else before?
Thank you. No more question. We just have the comment of my colleague Olivier Costa, who also recommends to use the service of a specialist to draft internal contracts. I believe it's always safer if it's possible, of course.
Yeah, that's clear. So just to conclude this, the 10 things that I show you this, you need to take care in the contract. But of course, if you have 190 over, given by a lawyer, I didn't see that it was the 10 only to put in a contract. I just listed because that has impact in the logistic and in this case for payment matters. And I link, let's say, the payment matters with what I see with this clause of contract. Okay? So we continue. So estimating payment risk on a client. So your first reflex when dealing with a foreign client should be to have a look on the website of Belgian, and I add, public credit insurer named Credendo. So just for the people who didn't follow the first seminar in October, November, December. So Credendo is a public Belgian credit insurer, meaning that surprisingly, they have the same, let's say, the same goal as Hub Brussels, but by a different way. Hub Brussels help to develop company by promoting their products foreign. At the level of the Belgian public credit insurer, that's to develop the company foreign by securing their payment. So that's really the goal of Credendo. So let's say we have here the political risk and the commercial risk, but I will explain to you by viewing directly the website. That's okay? You see my screen?
We see it, yes.
Okay. So let's say when we discuss about risk of payment and so on, always you have to have a look to your own country, which you are familiar. So let's say we take Belgium, Europe, and then we take Belgium. And I explain to you, so all the countries are presented like this. So let's say you have the political risk and you have the commercial risk. First, anyway, you have always to take care where your client is located. Because if he is in a bad country, for sure you will have problem to securing your payment. So we start with a political risk. So political risk, that's the risk of revolution, of riot, but also the reserve in foreign currency. And when you are dealing with a credit insurer, there is here a notion of short term, meaning short term that when you conclude the contract, the end of the contract, the end of the obligation of the contract is in a period of maximum 1 year. Can be extended to 2, but let's say 1 for most of the company. So let's say the Belgian public credit insurer does not fear any problem regarding the foreign reserve currency of Belgium within 1 year, nor in the long term till 7 years, long term. So that's one thing. So we are very happy. We are in a good country. But I told to you to have a look to the commercial risk. And the commercial risk here, we don't speak about your clients. We speak about the average of the client in a country. And let's see what has caused COVID nowadays. So the average of the Belgian company are in default of payment. Meaning that when you send an invoice today to a Belgian company, you can expect to have really trouble. So A, they pay on time. B, they pay with delay. C, they don't pay, or you have to force them to pay, except if you have secured your payment by something else than a transfer. Okay? So that's really the situation of COVID. So I changed country.
Vincent, just a question. Do you know how recent those data are? I mean, is it just a few months? I mean, it's the COVID.
That's the actual policy of Credendo.
Okay.
Meaning that all Europe is affected by COVID. So meaning that it's difficult to secure, let's say, payment by transfer through the credit insurer on Europe for the moment. So let's say at short term, I'm in Bulgaria, a country to which most of the Belgians has not clear idea or have bad ideas. Look, the risk at short term is exactly the same as Belgium. In the past, that was not the same. And even if you go to the best country in Europe, what was called the best country in Europe, Germany, look, the situation is the same. So the credit insurer will apply very high premium to secure payment simply by transfer. Okay? And I give you, just because we are speaking always of delivery in European Union and foreign, just have a look to a country that I know also somewhere else in another continent. So in Vietnam, there is a little more risk regarding the foreign reserve, but it's still good. 2 on 7. 1 is the best, 7 is the worst, not tolerable. So 2 is not so bad. And that's not so bad. Why? If today you have a Vietnamese client, I speak about a private company in Vietnam, the average of the payment situation is better than in Belgium. You have less risk. Totally surprising, you know. 1 year ago, it was not at all the same. But what happened? This kind of country, they control the COVID, and so the business is running without too much trouble. But of course, nothing is necessary. You have not one single story. If we take China, China is at the same level as Vietnam. Better in terms of foreign reserve. Of course, they have lots of money. But look, the Chinese company are now paying with delay, but they pay. The average in Belgium, they don't pay. The average in Germany, you are in high risk as well. Okay? So meaning that this crisis of COVID have changed a lot of things. Just before the COVID, for example, the strength of the average of Bulgarian company was the same as Germany. And before COVID, so in January last year, the strength of Romania was equal to France. So at that time, Germany was in A for average of payment of a private business. Bulgaria was the same, France was in B, and Romania was the same. So the trend was already changing because most of the people were thinking in Belgium that they take more risk if they sell to a Romanian than to a French, but that was not the case, according to the data from the credit insurer. That's okay?
Vincent, I have a question. I know that other companies also, like private companies, also assess political risk, like COFAS, Atradius, private insurance company. Do you think Credendo is the most reliable?
Let's say Credendo is, I don't say that it's more reliable. I will explain my things. First, with Credendo, you have possibility to be covered to any country when it's possible, of course. If the risk is bad, the risk is bad. To any business in any country. When you go to COFAS, so just for your information, COFAS is in France exactly the same as Credendo. But when COFAS is present in Belgium, they only cover some type of risk. And mostly the type of risk that they prefer, that's for short-term risk, so maximum 1 year, what I present to you, and also the country member of OECD. So meaning the developed country, or let's say the said developed country. But it will be more difficult to them to cover a Belgian company on some markets that Credendo cover. But I don't say bad things about them. So if you are really on OECD, you can, and within 1 year, you can put in concurrence COFAS, you can put in concurrence Atradius, and some other also that are existing. But if you deal, for example, with Vietnam, if you deal with an African country and so on, that's more difficult.
Okay, thank you.
And if you are a very big company with subsidiaries abroad, then let's say you will play with a credit insurer, because the credit insurer in Belgium does not cover exactly easily the same zone as the French, as the Spanish, because there are some link. So a company having a subsidiary in Spain can cover from Spain really easier South America than from Belgium. Because of course Spain is linked with South America. We have the same with the credit insurer in Portugal with Brazil, for example. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Why I present Credendo? It's because that's the only one who give information the same for all the country in their rating. That's why I refer to this website. But of course, I don't oblige anybody to subscribe an insurance to Credendo if they prefer to do it to another credit insurer. Okay? So now we speak about the subject of the day precisely. So we speak about the possible method of payment. So let's say we speak first about what you know the best, even in your private life, the transfer. The transfer without any additional surety or insurance, meaning that you, seller, you will bear all the consequences of a non-payment. So you deal with a company somewhere, you say, I send you the goods and you pay me by transfer. So meaning that if you are paid after the delivery of your goods, you are in full risk. You can combine transfer, and that's done through, let's say, mostly through the bank, but that's not the bank itself who do it. You can deal with your customer by transfer, but you will have a contract with what is called a factoring company or a factor. So what does it mean? Before starting to send invoice to a client, you will make approve this client to the factor, meaning that he will give you a credit limit, meaning that you can have a certain amount of money in risk during a certain duration. So let's say that was is called in French en cours. So meaning that, for example, if you are paid at 60 days and you deliver 100 per month, if there is a payment problem with a client, the maximum risk is 300. Why? You deliver 100 a month and you are paid at 60 days. So the first, at the beginning, day 0, you deliver 100, you will be paid in 60 days. After 1 month, you add 100, but you are not yet paid. So meaning that you are already in risk for 200. And let's say at the end of the second month, normally the payment of the first delivery has to come, but of course you deliver the third one. So if there is a delay, in total, you have 300 in risk. And so the factor agree to give you a credit limit of 300 with a payment term of 60 days, meaning that you can deliver 100 a month. If it's not clear what I say, you can ask me, or you can interrupt me. So meaning that the factor will check the solvability of clients from the seller and agree credit limit with a certain payment term. So they will also agree on the payment term. So meaning that in country, we already see this in some of our webinars. In some countries, let's say of the south of Europe, you cannot expect to be present there if you don't give 90 days payment to your clients. So meaning that the factor will give a credit limit for each of your clients. And the factor, what he do, he purchase your invoice and he pay you often in advance, meaning that in the contract of factoring, when you issue the invoice, you transmit to the factor, he pay you for all the invoice where he approve the client. And then after, or you have an account, specific account at the bank, meaning that when your clients pay you on your account, the account is blocked because it reimburses the factor. Or it goes directly to the account of the factor. Even in Belgium, you see then sometimes this, you receive an invoice from a company and it's returned that the invoice was given to the factor and that you have to pay directly to the factor. It's written on the invoice. It happens often in the logistics sectors, for example, in Belgium. So first possibility to secure a little your things, but only possible in some country. For sure, around Belgium, that's not a problem. If you have clients in the Netherlands, if you have clients in Germany and in Luxembourg and in France, there are some factors very active on this. So I repeat, the factors are mostly linked with banks, but they are independent companies. Second possibility, let's say the factor, but that's not all the factor, they accept to do this mostly for the larger company at the level of OECD, so the so-called rich countries. If you don't secure by a factor, of course, you can do through a credit insurer. So it will be exactly the same. So the client has to be accepted by the credit insurer. You will receive a credit limit, and the credit insurer will agree payment terms with the client that you should give to your client. If the client doesn't pay you, what happens after a certain period? You will be paid by the credit insurer less what is called quotité garantie in French, guaranteed quotity in English, meaning that a credit insurer will never pay you 100% of your invoice. Usually you are covered at 95%. Why stay 5%? Because the credit insurer will ask you to help him to recover his money. So you need to give him some documents and so on. And if he receives the payment from the client at the moment, let's say you will receive also the rest. That's to motivate you to help the credit insurer. So two possibilities to secure a transfer. If you don't want to be in full risk towards your clients. You don't want to be in full risk. It's not possible to have a factor. It's not possible to have a credit insurer. So the only acceptable solution if you want to take care to your money is to request from your client a down payment, meaning that he will pay you part of the totality of the order in advance. And don't forget, if you produce specific goods or perform specific services for a client, you need to receive this down payment before manufacturing or before performing the service. If your goods are totally, let's say, common goods that can be delivered to some other clients without any problem, don't forget to the labeling that we discussed at the end of the year and so on, then you can say that you want your down payment before you send the goods, before delivery. No question till now?
No, no questions so far.
Okay. So let's say cost and care regarding the transfer, important for you. So for transfer within the European Union in euro currency, the cost of transaction applied by a bank, so your bank, cannot be higher than for national operation. There are conditions for this, but nowadays that's clear. Everybody do the transfer with the IBAN, and even though you don't have any more to give the BIC to the bank and so on. So with IBAN, the system finds automatically the BIC. So you are in the condition to have that standard price. Should payment be made in other currency than euro, the bank fixing the contract the fee that they will take. So meaning that if you receive some dollars on your account, there will be some payment fees and so on. And this can be shared or not with the clients. When you do a foreign payment, you have always to say if you share the fee, meaning that the one who sent the money pay his bank and the one who receive it pay his bank, or if all is supported by the one who sent or by the one who received. What is fair is always that each party support the cost in their respective country. It will be the same for letter of credit. What I recommend you strongly, if you have a bank account in euro at the name of your company and only a bank account in euro, but problem, you negotiate contract in a foreign currency. Can be Swiss franc, can be dollars, can be pounds, can be whatever, because there are lots of currency that you can receive. Even let's say the Russian ruble, you can receive it in Belgium. So if you accept to be paid in Russian rubles, it will come in Belgium. But when a foreign currency arrives on an account in Belgium, if you have only an account in euro, what the bank will do, They will convert you when the money arrives, this foreign currency in euro. And of course, a bank is a company who is looking for profit. And what they do, they will change you this foreign currency, not at the best rate, at a rate that interests them. So let's say during your day, the value of a currency toward another is changing at any time. So of course they will apply the best for them, the worst for you, change rate of the day. So if I have an advice, if you deal with client in foreign currency, open an account in the currency that the client will pay you. So now let's say we speak about something that is not so common, but is known in Belgium. And perhaps if you are a young company, perhaps somebody already asked you this. It's typical of Belgium. And I can tell you, I work for a larger company with foreign shareholders. And for example, I was working in a company with an American shareholder. It was forbidden for the Belgian subsidiary to accept this method of payment. And I will explain you why after. So let's say that's what is called the draft or the bill of exchange. Trade in French, or lettre de change in French. That's the same. So a draft, what is the problem? And that's our first payment like this, but the letter of credit will be the same. Draft is an independent commitment toward the contract. I put a U too much. What does it mean? When you sell goods, if your clients agree to pay by draft bill of exchange, what does it mean? You seller will issue a draft bill of exchange towards your client, and your client will sign it for acceptation. By accepting the draft, the clients commit to pay the amount in the currency indicated on or at maturity date, indicated at order of the seller, meaning that you issue as seller the bill of exchange, the client accepts it, but at the maturity date of the payment, it's not necessarily you who would go with this document to claim the payment to your client or to its bank. It can be somebody to whom you sell this draft because you wanted the money in advance. So meaning that the draft in Belgium is well protected under Belgian law, but if the contract is signed with another applicable law, the surety of this method can be different and has therefore to be checked. So you need to see with a bank, with your bank, what is the surety of a draft, for example, in France, in Germany, and so on. And often they will tell you that there is no security linked to this, because, for example, in France, there are not big security for the draft. The security was on the check, but I didn't explain to you the check here, because it's really typical French method of payment. If some of you do lots of business in France, I can explain you why the check is interesting in France, but take care, if it's small amount, you have lots of fee regarding this. That's why I didn't put in my presentation. So let's say the draft is well protected under Belgian rule, and so if it's inside Belgium, that's a good way to protect your payment. Why? Because inside Belgium, a supplier dealing with a new company, so you don't have solvability review. You don't know if they commit to their commitment, if they have enough capital and so on. Or if a company, let's say, start to be not so good, meaning that they start to pay late and so on. What you do, thanks to the draft, you secure your payment. Why? Because when a company has to pay, if a company has signed some draft in Belgium, for sure they will pay it immediately. Why? Because if at the maturity date of a draft they don't pay, what will happen? It will be witnessed that they refuse to pay, and it will be witnessed and published, meaning that then after the company that did not pay a draft at maturity is blacklisted by the banker. What is interesting in a draft in Belgium for a supplier, if you do foreign, I told you, you have to take care and to see if it's the same as in Belgium. I cannot advise you for every country, you have to check everywhere, but for sure you cannot do this in China, for example. So what happened in Belgium? For example, you drive goods to a client, yourself, for example, and he receives the goods. You can immediately ask him to sign the draft when you give them the goods. And he signed the draft at that moment. From that moment, they are committed to pay at maturity. And the big danger for a buyer, and that's why I explained also to you, because if you are seller, you are also buyer. So let's say if some supplier do this for you, take care if you sign a draft, even if the goods arrive damaged or are not in conformity with your order. If you sign the draft, you have to pay it at maturity date. And I give you an example. I was working for a Belgian engineering company, and I was with a financial director who was French, so didn't know the use in Belgium. And as the company faced certain times some problems, one supplier in Belgium accept to deliver with acceptance of a draft. And what happened when we were near the maturity of the draft, the company doesn't have that money. So what they do, they phone, so the French director phone to the supplier and tell him, I don't have the money for that day, but I can send you immediately half of the amount by transfer. And of course, the company say, okay, and he said the rest, I will send it 1 month after. And they say, okay. But then I was used to this method of payment. And I say to this French director, yes, you do this, but you take back the draft. He say, why? I say, if at a maturity date they present the draft, you have to pay it. Because the draft, the one who have in hand, can ask for the payment. So let's say if one day a supplier asks you to sign a draft, think twice and perhaps have a look to this presentation. Let's say that's very short, but it highlights the possible problems. Now we go in the really in the method of payment for international business. And the most simple one is what is called the cash against documents. So cash against documents, what does it mean? When the seller sends the goods, usually if you deliver goods, what you do by post or by a FedEx or DHL or whatever, you send the documents. Of course, the documents we discussed during some seminars about it, and the website has access to market. So if you're not familiar to this, please go to see the video of this webinar. So let's say the document, basically that's at least an invoice, packing list, certificate of origin, and transport documents. And I add in case of sea or air transportation, why? Because by sea and air transportation, the documents are not traveling with the goods. If you send goods with a truck to go through the border, of course, we speak outside European Union, To cross the border, he needs this document. So if you deliver by trucks, that's very difficult to apply this method of payment, but by air or by sea, yes. So what is the cash against document? At the time of the contract, the buyer, so when you sign the contract, it has to be inside, the buyer will inform you, seller, about who is his banker, meaning the banker name and address, and of course phone number and name of the person and so on. Where the supplier has to send the document, but not himself, through the intermediary of its bank. So meaning that when I have the documents about the delivery, I will give it to my bank to my seller, and the bank will send to the bank of the client. So the procedure is the following: the goods are sent, the documents are given to seller's bank by the seller, with a request to send it to buyer's bank. And as you are in the framework of a cash against document, the seller knows as he has to do with the document, and the seller's banker, what he do with the document, he send to the buyer's banker. But as you are in the framework of a cash against document, he will send it with an irrevocable instruction, which is you can deliver the document to the client only against payment. Meaning that if the client does not pay his bank, and his bank does not send the money to the bank of the seller, they cannot give the document to the bank. So if a client gives the payment to his bank, what will happen then? He will receive the documents from its banker after payment. Why he needs the documents? He needs the document to custom clear the goods. So that's the lock of the system. If he don't pay, he doesn't have the goods, and he doesn't have the documents. And if he doesn't have the documents, he cannot custom clear the goods at the port or airport of arrival. So meaning that then the goods will not fall in his hand. So in some countries, the supplier can take back the goods and drive it back to him without that it fall in the hand of the customer. That's a basic presentation. So if one day you really want to implement this, more has to be known. But of course, if we go in deep details, I have to explain you also all the flow of the documentation, what is the use and so on. So if ever one day you have a problem with such a problem, or you want to do such payment, you can always call, and it's 5-10 minutes on the phone to explain you precisely and to see if it will match your requirements. So cash against documents, the costs and the care. So it is highly recommended to use this method of payment only for sea air transportation. I know that some people use it for Turkey by truck, but the only surety the truck will arrive to the client, everything will be done regarding the custom clearance. Only in Turkey, for example, we put an origin document in the cash against document, and the only advantage for the Turkish, let's say the truck already arrived to them, custom clearance is already done and so on. But if ever they cannot present the original origin documents, the Turkish custom will apply the custom duties. So the advantage is only, let's say, if there are some custom duties to be paid in Turkey on your product by the client. If he has no custom duty to pay due to the cash against document, okay, he has to pay the damage to have the document, but most of the time he don't need it because the custom clearance is already done. Some company in specific sectors can use this if, for example, the client needs some certificate of conformity or certificate of quality or health certificate and so on. So if they don't have the original in hand, they have problem toward their authority. That's also possible to do this. And so I recommend for you for sea and air transportation, but really the perfect match is with the sea transportation, because in sea transportation, if you don't present to the shipping line, so to the carrier, one original of a bill of lading at the port of arrival, you cannot access to the goods at the port of arrival, meaning that you cannot exit it from the port. So you really need one original of a transport document to go to the port. Why I mentioned this, and I mentioned specifically in Brussels, because I know that in Brussels, lots of companies are dealing with Maghreb. So, for example, for delivery in Morocco and in Tunisia, it would be better to use the following method of payment, the letter of credit. But the big problem with the letter of credit, let's say there is a time process through the bank, which is quite important. And a ship to go from Antwerp to Morocco or Tunisia is around 1 week. And the time for all this processing through the bank, it takes, let's say, some weeks, something like 3 weeks. And so if you deal with a letter of credit, the goods will be stuck at the port in Morocco or in Tunisia during some weeks. And after certain days, let's say, the cost of a container, for example, at the port, or some goods at the airport and so on, a container at the port, after 10, 15 days, you are around $100 per container per day. So of course, if we have to wait through the bank during 1 month, it will already be around 3,000 euro. So of course, the client don't want to suffer this. So Moroccan customer and Tunisian often ask for a cash against document because they don't want to issue a letter of credit because it costs more money and it's more difficult. But of course, you don't have the same surety. So it's not bad, but that's not the perfect thing. But sometimes you are covered by a credit insurer, and he asks you not to do by transfer, but by a cash against document. Like this, there is more security, and he accepts the risk. Just one thing, for a particular country, Algeria, I already mentioned, from 5,000 euro, all payment must be done by a letter of credit. But under 5,000 euro, let's say often it will be by cash against document, because the exchange control of Algeria is really reluctant to transfer. So meaning most of the Algerian clients for 3,500 euro, they already say that they want to pay by cash against documents in order that their bank is in the game towards the foreign exchange control of Algeria. No questions so far?
No, it seems very clear, no question.
I hope that everybody is not sleeping. So now we are at what is the most complex things. So to be clear, and I discussed with Thomas before we start, that's really an introduction. So I give you, let's say, what is that method of payment. But of course, if you need to manage that method of payment, or if you want to apply to a contract and you don't have the knowledge, of course, you have to be informed before doing it, because that's a very attractive method of payment, because that's possible to secure difficult things through that method of payment. But in our world, one mistake, one error is accepted by everybody. I didn't put it in my slide because I didn't really explain you the game with all the documents and so on. But be aware that even if you have 10, 100 or 200 pages of document inside the letter of credit, if you have one single mistake, error, inconsistency, the bank will not anymore grant the payment. So meaning that that's a method of payment where you have to respect everything that is imposed in a document from a bank. Okay, so now I start with this method of payment. So this method of payment is called letter of credit. If you heard about documentary credit, that's exactly the same. So that's synonym, exactly the same thing. If you see the abbreviation L/C, that's the same also, letter of credit. For people that would be linked with Eastern Europe, like Russia and so on, they have a name that is also applicable in German, accreditiv. So if a Russian client say to you, I will pay you by accreditiv, he means that he pay you by a letter of credit. In their Russian English, that's often a way to speak. What is the best advantage of a letter of credit? It is worldwide now. I deal with some people in Africa, I deal with some people in Asia, I deal with some people in Latin America, I deal with some people in Eastern Europe. Everybody knows this for, of course, companies who are used to use these tools. And why I insist particularly, remember what we discussed a few minutes ago. Average of payment, even now in Western Europe, for the company is bad without surety. So we are at the beginning of 2021. Within some days or weeks, you will have all the balance sheet of a company that are falling, and lots of companies are affected by COVID. So meaning that within 2-3 months, most of the company that have bad figures, what will be the situation? They will be refused by their credit insurer. They will perhaps have some problem with their bankers because let's say they are not anymore so good as before. But let's say a banker can, against some guarantee and so on, still keeping connection with a company. And the letter of credit, that's really the banker who commit to pay and not anymore the buyer. Meaning that by the way of a letter of credit, you replace the commercial risk on the client by a commercial risk on the bank from the client, on the bank from the client. And of course, the bank of the client has some agreement with the client that you know even yourself. When a company gives you a credit line, that means that you can pay your supplier through this credit line, and after you reimburse your bank according to the agreements. But bank does not offer only cash to their clients. They offer also commitments like letter of credit. What does it mean? That your bank will commit to pay your supplier if he delivers the goods or the services strictly according to the letter of credit and the term of the letter of credit. So what is the big advantage of this? It is impossible to know worldwide the solvability of each kind, but the international banking system can manage to make available rating about solvability of the banks worldwide, meaning that any bank in the world knows the solvability of another. And you will see that it will become interesting in a further step. So furthermore, all the banks are linked by a single method of private communication, and perhaps you know it. It's even located in Luik in Belgium. That's SWIFT. So that's the private system of communication between the banks. So meaning that the letter of credit are supported by this system, and let's say are standardized by this system of communication, meaning that in a letter of credit, you have some titles, some fields with, and that means that there are some information inside the letter of credit that the beneficiary, meaning the seller who will be paid, has to respect if he wants to be paid in the framework of a letter of credit. What is also interesting, so the communication can be worldwide through the system. The only exception, because American embargoes and so on, you have to know that, for example, Iranian banks have been disconnected from the SWIFT system because SWIFT system is submitted to American laws and so on. And as there is a complete embargo on Iran, it's not anymore possible for Iranian bank to communicate through SWIFT messages. But in the way, it's very difficult to deal with Iran regarding transfer of currency. So that's not a big issue for the present time. Second advantage, the mechanism of the letter of credit is ruled by International Chamber of Commerce, so the same who edicts the Incoterms, and it's named UCP 600. That's the rules about the letter of credit and the examination of the documents presented to a bank in the framework of a letter of credit. So meaning that these rules are very long-standing. So from the time that I work and study international business, it's nearly 35 years now, the rules change only one time. Why? Because all the users, so the seller, the purchaser, all the banks in the world need to know the rules of the game. So what is a letter of credit? So a letter of credit, first, that's an independent commitment from the bank of the buyer, meaning issuing bank, toward the seller. So meaning the bank of the buyer commits to pay the seller at certain conditions. So the bank of the buyer is now issuing bank because she issued the letter of credit. And the letter of credit is an independent, juridically independent commitment toward the contract. So meaning that the banks will only look in the wording of a letter of credit. Never they will ask the contract to see something. All has to be made in the letter of credit. So for example, this morning I was with a company in Nivelles discussing because let's say we have signed a contract. That's a good contract. But now we are negotiated the letter of credit, and the clients do a certain wording that he wants to ask his issuing bank to do it. But we do not agree because it does not reflect the contract. So the issuing bank commit to pay a certain amount in a certain currency, of course a transferable currency, to the seller, provided that the seller, which is called beneficiary in a letter of credit, present documents mentioned in the letter of credit. So you have a wording of a letter of credit, and there are all conditions mentioning, and you have to present the document as seller as it is requested by the requirement of the letter of credit. Meaning that the delivery that you organize, I speak a lot with a company, and sometimes you have people working for the logistic, they never see the wording of the letter of credit. But in the letter of credit, sometimes it's written, for example, partial delivery forbidden. And what happened? you don't have one product available, you already send a part and then a second part. The bank, when they receive the document, they don't pay because the delivery has to be done in one time. It was requested by the letter of credit, but nobody at the logistic was aware of this. So, meaning that the letter of credit is sent by the issuing bank to a nominated bank in the country of the beneficiary. A nominated bank in the country of the beneficiary, that is called notifying bank. And for information, the notifying bank can even be the bank of the seller. So meaning that the bank of the buyer sends his commitment through SWIFT to the banker of the seller. And the banker of the seller, what happened? If we are at the first step here, he play only as notifying bank. What he do? He transmit the commitment of the bank to the seller. So he say, I receive for you this letter of credit from the bank of your client. Please check the condition of this letter of credit. And if you agree on it, please proceed with delivery and then transmit to us the document. So meaning that after the notification by the bank in the seller's country, the notifying bank, when you have done a delivery in the framework of a letter of credit and in the condition of a letter of credit, you have a certain number of days to present the document at the notifying bank. This number of days, that's normally in standard 21 days. That's why I tell you that for Morocco, if you go to the bank 21 days after the transport documents, the goods are already in Morocco from 2 weeks. So it's too much for Moroccan. That's why I speak about the other method that they prefer. But it's not so safe. So you have a certain number of days after the date of the transport documents to present the document. Important notes at the request of the bank of the buyer, but of course this you have put in your contract. In place of having a notifying bank that notify you, you can request that the contract, that the letter of credit is confirmed by the bank in the seller country, which can be, I remind, your bankers. Meaning that at this moment, what happened? You have done a contract with a client, you want to be paid in the framework of a letter of credit. He go to his bank to issue the letter of credit, that's the issuing bank, but you requested that the letter of credit is confirmed by the banker in your country or even by your banker. What does it mean? When the bank in your country receive the letter of credit, what happened? They confirm it, meaning that your bank say to you, if you bring me the document strictly conform to the wording of the letter of credit, if documents are strictly conform, I commit to take over the obligation of payment from the issuing bank, meaning that you do an export, perhaps in China, perhaps in South America or whatever, and you have succeeded through this method of payment to secure your payment through your banker, meaning that that's your banker who takes the risk from that moment on the foreign buyers, banks, and country. Meaning, for example, I was discussing this morning with ING. For India, for example, for the transaction that we made, they accept to confirm for a duration of 6 months. So meaning whatever happened in India during 6 months, if I'm able to send the goods, and I have an Incoterm of family C, and I present the document to ING, even if the Indian bank is not in position of a client do bankruptcy or something like this, Belgian bank, ING, will pay. So, if notifying or confirming bank find the document compliant, if the notifying bank act as notifying bank, it will transmit the document to the issuing bank and request payment from the issuing bank, meaning that the supplier will be paid after issuing bank pay notifying bank. So meaning if the Belgian bank does not receive the money from the bank foreign, you will not be paid. If the credit is confirmed, so the bank, the confirming bank, will pay directly the seller and then request to be reimbursed by the issuing bank. If there is a question you can ask, otherwise, let's say I have a small scheme here. That's not perfect, but that's the easiest that I find for the moment. Any question? No?
No question.
So let's say when you have a contract with your client, you are at the top here. So meaning you are a vendor, an exporter, and you do a contract with your purchaser here. In that contract, as it was the beginning of today's webinar, what happened? You have a method of payment that is a letter of credit, notify or confirm, but I will always request you, let's say, to ask us confirm if it's possible, because that's the most valuable surety. If you have only notify, if you don't succeed to secure through a credit insurer, you are still at risk on the country of the purchase. So what happened? You have the contract, and what the purchaser do, he go to his bank to request the issuance of a letter of credit. How he can ask this to his bank? Because he has some credit line, commitment lines. If he don't have, the bank to do so will ask him to put money on an account, because of course if there is no agreement between the bank and the purchaser, of course the bank will not take risk for the purchaser, because she doesn't commit this, so she will ask to put the money. Why the purchaser will accept to go through the bank and not to pay you directly before sending your goods? If he pay you directly, what happened? He pay you, imagine that you disappear, the money is to you, but he will never receive the goods. If he do a documentary credit, even if he has no credit line with the bank, and he has to put the money on a bank account of a bank, if the supplier does not send the goods, he knows that the supplier will not be paid, and then after the expiry of the letter of credit, he can have the money back. So what is the situation now? He requests issue to his bank, issuing bank. The bank will send this to the notifying bank in the country of the seller. The bank in the country of the seller, what she do? She send the letter of credit to you, vendor, exporter. What you have to do, you have to check if the letter of credit you receive is compliant throughout your contract, meaning the same amount, meaning the same method of payment, the same delivery time, and so on. Because you have to be aware, for example, if you are in the Middle East, the opening of a letter of credit, as well as in India, most of the time that's the last step of a negotiation. So of course you sign a contract with a client, but during the opening of a letter of credit, he will try to have, let's say, a discount, still a small discount. He will open the letter of credit not for the value of a contract, but for 1% less. Or he will try to have, let's say, a shorter delivery term, a shorter delivery time, sorry. Or he will try to change the Incoterm. He was buying FOB. He asked you now to take the transport in charge to him. So, for example, in the Middle East, it happens quite frequently. If you deal in another country, that's not the case. So, if the letter of credit is okay, then you can proceed with delivery because you are sure that you can present the document to the bank as requested. Don't forget that you need to know deeply the mechanism. So don't expect that after this presentation, you can do easily a letter of credit and have the security to reply it. You have to learn how to do your documents and so on. So he sent the document, the goods to the purchaser. When you send goods, you have some documents. Some documents you do yourself, packing list, invoice. Some you receive from the carrier. So, for example, the transport documents. Some you will go to the custom, to the Chamber of Commerce, to inspection organism like SGS, Veritas, and so on. So all the documents needed in the framework of a letter of credit, you will collect them, you will check them, and so on. And then, when everything is fine, you go to the bank in your country, the nominated bank, that can be or notifying or confirming bank. What she do at the receipt of the document, she has 5 days to check the document according to the wording of the letter of credit received from the issuing bank and the rules of International Chamber of Commerce. If the check is okay, so you have not any discrepancies in the document, that's the term of the bank, discrepancies. So all your documents are perfect. I remind you, one mistake, one discrepancy, one error, the payment is lost, the surety of the payment is lost. So it's really not an easy job to do. So documents are okay. If the bank is acting as notifying bank, she will send the document to the issuing bank. And she will say to the issuing bank, I check the documents are good, please send the money. The bank will send the money, and when the notifying bank receives the money, she sends to you. If the bank is acting as they call guarantor here, but that's confirming bank, what happened? You present the document, they are correct, the bank pay you immediately. And then she sends the document to the issuing bank, and she asks for reimbursement. And by that way, you have erased most of the risk of a foreign country. If you are in Incoterm of C family, because if you are in Incoterm of F family or E family, the client has to come to pick up the goods. So if the client does not exist anymore and so on, he cannot come to collect the goods. If you are in D family, most of the buyer want a signature from them that they receive the goods in good condition and so on. If the client does not existing anymore, of course he cannot sign this. So that's really the game of a letter of credit. So if you ask me the amount that can be covered by a letter of credit, so let's say we take Algeria as basis. So from 5,000 euro in Algeria, you have already letter of credit. And I had letter of credit covering, let's say, 100 million of euro and so on for engineering company, because it covers, of course, a whole contract. There is still one other method of payment, but one single contract has to be more than 5 million euro. And then you have to So that's the buyer's credit, but I didn't explain today because I think that no company attending this seminar has one single order that represents 5 million euro and relating delivery of goods, of course. So let's say that's all for this presentation of a letter of credit. Should somebody be interested, I think you have to say to Thomas and the team of Brussels that really you need more information of this and so on. If it's some punctual question that you have regarding this, at the end of my presentation, you have my email and my mobile. I can very easily answer to you because I know well this route. This morning I was still on phone with a banker, and let's say what the exporter wanted to do, I tell to them 10 times that it was not good, but they forced me to contact the banker, and the bankers say the person who advised you know the rules of the bank. So of course it has to be like this, otherwise you have a risk for your payment. So to conclude today, but of course after you can ask me some questions if still any, I'm still available. How to choose the proper method of payment? First thing, you have to know yourself. So you have to know what is your treasury, how many money you have inside your company, and if there is a risk of payment of your clients, are you able to absorb it? So knowing your treasury, meaning that if you need some pre-financing, let's say you have to know also, because of course pre-financing that can be done by a down payment from your client, but also by a line of credit of your bank. But your bank will never give you a line of credit if you don't have some surety. So we will speak a little after. Checking political risk on country of buyer, for sure you have to do this. So let's say you saw how I do it. I do on this website from Credendo, and more the country is near 1, better it is for short term. More it is near 7 or 7. If it's 7, no credit insurer can cover this country. So that's not a good thing. And for your information, bank that confirm your letter of credit after they go to credit insurer to insure their risk. So meaning that few banks will accept to confirm a letter of credit if they are not sure that the credit insurer will not beg them. Checking commercial risk on your customer. So I give you 2 methods to do it. So, or you go to a factor, if it's in an OECD country, that's possible to do it through a factor if you want to have payment in advance of your invoice, or you can go to your credit insurer, and of course he will have a look to your client and give you a credit line on the client. Take care. When a credit insurer tell you that your client is not good for 200, he tell you maximum 100. Okay, you take the credit insurance, but you sell for 200. At the moment, the client does not pay 100, so you didn't even exceed what the credit insurer do. Okay, that's fine. Now what happened? You deliver for 160. That's 60 exceeding the maximum that was granted to you by your credit insurer. For your credit insurer, you are in default. Why? Because he gives you a credit limit, and if you respect the credit limit, you don't increase the risk of the company, but you increase the amount that you sell to the company, so you increase the risk. What are the payments?
I
Yes.
have just a question for the point 3, checking commercial risk on your customer. For small amount, do you think it would be relevant for a company? I mean, if the company doesn't want to subscribe to a credit insurance, to have a look by themselves at the financial
So
statement of the client.
you can have a look by yourself, but take care. In Belgium, that's very easy. You go at the National Bank, balance sheets on 12, and you find everything. That's not the case for most of the country. And even, you know, for the moment, if you want to have, let's say, all what is free for the moment is at BNB for Belgium. And the figures that you will have, that's the figure of 2019, because the account of 2020 are not yet published. So we all know that COVID affected all the companies. So let's say if you accept a client based on the figures of 2019, you don't know the evaluation in 2020. So for me, we are really not in a good period to take risk. Only risk that I accept, and that's at the end of the slide. You say small amounts. So let's say you have in your treasury 10,000 and you sell for 100 and the client does not pay you. Okay, you have still 9,900. You sell for 9,500, which is not a big amount. 9,500. Yes, but you have only 10,000 in cash. The client does not pay you. What you do? Perhaps you cannot pay your salary at the end of a month, or your rent, or whatever. So let's say when we speak about small amount, I don't like this word small amount. If I work with a very small company, perhaps 500 euro is more important for them than 100,000 in some big companies or 1 million in some big companies. So let's say for me, you can accept the risk if a client does not pay you. It does not affect your company, and it does not affect your survivability towards your supplier, towards your bankers, and so on. Then I can accept. But small amount like this, that doesn't mean anything. Remember that now you can create a company with €1. So you have a company of €1 and somebody doesn't pay you 500. If you have only this €1 in the company, that's not good. That's what I mean.
Okay, thank you.
So what are the payment news in the country of the client and the client himself? So let's say, for example, if you deal, and that's a good market for everybody, if you deal with Nordic countries, client pay you very fast. 15 days, 3 weeks, very nice. You go to Greece, they pay you 4 months after. That's the average of Greece. But of course, if you want to sell at finished condition in Greece, that's very difficult. Opposite, if you say to finish, you will pay me in 4 months, you give him an advantage. So this you have to take care. And also inside the country, you have some news from some clients. So for example, when you go to Carrefour and things like this, when you exit the shop, you pay what you buy. But at the time you buy the goods, Carrefour is far from paying the supplier. They play with the money. So meaning that if you want to sell to Carrefour, okay, in Belgium that's perhaps 40 days, but Carrefour will impose you 60 days. So this you have to know also where you go. And so, for example, some business want to be paid quickly, for example, logistic, while some other business, it take more longer time to pay. because the use of the business. Important, if you need pre-financing, so meaning you need to receive money in advance to work, is your client able to do a down payment to you? If not, can your banker grant you pre-financing so you have a good business? And most of the company, they are always speaking about the profit. Oh, I have a nice order. I have 50% margin. Yes, but client will pay you 100% of the order 90 days after delivery. How do you live till that time? So if you request pre-financing to your banker is also aware of COVID, so he will tell you, good that you have this good business, but let's say, yeah, okay, I can give you a pre-financing, but I want that the client pay by letter of credit. Why? Because like this, they are sure to recover their money from the bank of the client, and they are not in risk on the client. If the client fail to pay you and you cannot reimburse the bank, they are also in risk. If you don't want to work by letter of credit and so on, is your client or clients in plural coverable by an insurer credit? So can be or cannot be, has to be checked. And finally, should you be at risk for payment, have you enough treasury to absorb the non-payment without being in troubles yourself? That's what I mean. So I finished my presentation. So if you have any question, feel free. Really, I have time to answer to you, and it will be a pleasure to do so.
So no question. So thank you, Vincent, and thanks to the audience. And I will see you next week for the next export talk, how to finance your international activities. Have a good afternoon. Thank you.
Good afternoon to everybody. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.